I went into surgery thinking my biggest problem was a medical procedure. I had a $425,000 condo and carefully built walls to keep my controlling parents at bay. But anesthesia leaves you defenseless. When I woke up 5 days later, my walls were demolished, and so was my home. My parents were right there, smiling, ready to explain how selling my life out from under me was actually an act of love. Stability is not a feeling, it is a structure you build, brick by heavy brick, until the walls are thick enough to keep the wind out. I was 33 years old when I finally felt the mortar set. My condo in Marrow Glen was not a mansion. It was a 2-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor of a converted textile mill, with exposed brick that shed red dust if you brushed against it too hard, and a heating system that rattled like a dying engine in January. But it was mine. I had bought it for $425,000, a number that still made my stomach turn when I looked at the mortgage statement. I had clawed my way to that number through 6 years of 60-hour weeks as a project manager, skipping vacations, driving a sedan that smelled permanently of old coffee, and eating meal-prepped rice and beans until the texture made me gag. The day I closed on the place, I sat on the bare hardwood floor and drank a bottle of cheap champagne out of a plastic cup. I remember touching the floorboards, feeling the cold varnish. It felt like proof. I had done it. I had separated myself from the chaos of my upbringing. I had drawn a line in the sand that said, "This is where Ellie Hayes begins, and where the rest of you end." My parents, Diane and Victor, did not believe in lines. They believed in osmosis. They lived 40 minutes away in a house they had refinanced 3 times, a place filled with nice furniture they could not technically afford, and an air of desperate respectability. They were the kind of parents who showed up unannounced on a Tuesday evening because they happened to be in the neighborhood. Even though Marrow Glen was nowhere near their neighborhood, they would walk in, bringing noise and judgment. Diane would run a finger over my kitchen island, checking for dust, while Victor would stand by the window, hands in his pockets, asking questions about the HOA fees or the property value, always fishing for a number. "It is a good investment," Victor would say, nodding as if he had brokered the deal himself. "Family assets are important. We have to look out for each other." I never corrected him when he called it a family asset. I just offered him coffee and checked the clock, counting down the minutes until they left. It was the tax I paid for peace. I thought I had managed them perfectly. I thought I had built a fortress they could visit but never conquer. I was wrong. The fortress had a weakness, and it was my own body. The medical issue started small, a dull ache in my abdomen that I ignored for 3 months until I fainted in the grocery store aisle, right in front of the organic pasta. By the time I saw a specialist at Marrow Glen Medical Pavilion, the word routine was being used with a lot of caveats. It was a structural defect, something that needed surgical correction. I need to schedule it for next week. The doctor told me, "You will be out for 3 days, maybe 4. Recovery is 6 weeks. I sat in my car in the parking garage afterward, gripping the steering wheel. 4 days. I could do 4 days. I had sick leave. I had savings. I had systems. I called my parents that night. I kept my voice light, breezy. "It is just a minor procedure." I told them, nothing to worry about. "They are just going in to clean up some scar tissue. I will be in and out." "Are you sure?" Diane asked, her voice pitching up into that frantic register that usually preceded a demand. "We should be there. Victor can drive us down. We can stay at your place." "No," I said, too quickly. I took a breath and slowed down. "No. Mom, really, it is better if I rest alone." The doctor said, absolute quiet. "I will call you when I am out." There was a silence on the other end. The heavy, loaded silence of 2 people who felt denied their right to spectate. "We are just worried about you." "Ellie," Victor said, taking the phone. "You are all we have. You know that. I knew that. That was exactly the problem. I spent the next 3 days preparing. I paid every bill a month in advance. I cleaned the condo until it smelled of bleach and lemon. I stocked the freezer with soup. I set up my auto-reply at work. And then, the day before the surgery, I sat in a small, windowless office at the hospital with a woman named Tessa Rowe. Tessa was the admission coordinator. She had a kind face and tired eyes, and she moved through the paperwork with the efficiency of someone who did this 50 times a day. "We need a designated contact," Tessa said, tapping the keyboard. "Someone who can make decisions if you are unable to, and someone we can release information to." I did not hesitate. Nora Klein. Tessa typed it in. Relationship friend. Best friend. Actually, Nora and I had known each other since college. She was the one person who knew exactly how much money I made, how much I feared turning into my mother, and where I kept my spare key. She was sharp, loyal, and immune to my parents' guilt trips. Tessa printed a form and slid it across the desk. "This is the HIPAA release. It explicitly states who we can talk to. If their name is not on here, we cannot even confirm you are a patient." I signed my name with a flourish. I looked at the blank lines under Nora's name. "Do you want to add anyone else?" Tessa asked. "Parents, spouse, no." I said, "Just Nora. My parents worry too much. If they talk to a doctor, they will panic. It is better for everyone if Nora handles the updates." Tessa nodded. She had seen it all before. She stamped the form and put it in a folder. "Okay, you're all set. Just Nora Klein." I walked out of that office feeling secure. I had the legal paperwork, I had the boundaries, I had the plan. The morning of the surgery, Nora drove me to the hospital. The sky was a bruised purple, the sun just starting to bleed over the horizon. I felt small in the passenger seat, clutching my overnight bag. "You have the key I asked." "Yes," Nora said, keeping her eyes on the road. "And you will feed the cat." "Yes." "Ellie. And if my mother calls, I will tell her you are resting, and you will call her when you are lucid," Nora said. "Stop worrying. You are going to take a nap, and when you wake up, I will be there with a smoothie and gossip." I smiled. It sounded so simple. I checked into pre-op at 6 in the morning. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and floor wax. I changed into the gown, the fabric thin and rough against my skin. The nurse started an IV in my hand, a sharp pinch that made my eyes water. Then the anesthesiologist came in, a tall man who spoke in a low, soothing drone. "We are going to give you something to relax you now," he said. I looked at the clock on the wall. 7:15. I closed my eyes. I expected to count backward from 10. I don't remember if I even made it to 9. The darkness was not like sleep. Sleep has dreams. Sleep has a texture. This was a void. It was heavy and thick. A black water that I was drowning in. There was no time in the void, only a sense of pressure, of things shifting and moving above me that I could not see. At some point, there were voices. Not the calm, professional voices of the doctors. These were sharp, anxious voices. They sounded like metal scraping against glass. "She is our daughter." I tried to move toward the sound, but my body was not there. I was just a consciousness floating in the dark. "We need to make sure everything is taken care of." That voice. I knew that voice. It was Victor. But Victor was not supposed to be there. Victor was supposed to be 40 minutes away. Waiting for a phone call. I tried to open my eyes, but the lids felt like they were made of lead. I heard a beeping sound, rhythmic and annoying. I heard the squeak of rubber shoes on linoleum. Someone touched my hand. The skin felt dry, papery. "It is for her own good." That was Diane. I wanted to scream. I wanted to sit up and ask what they were doing, why they were there, where Nora was. But the darkness surged up again, a tidal wave of sedation, and pulled me back under. When I finally surfaced, really surfaced, the light was blinding. It hurt my eyes, a sharp, white pain that went straight to the back of my skull. I blinked, trying to clear the grit from my lashes. My mouth tasted like cotton and old pennies. My throat was raw, as if I had swallowed broken glass. I tried to lift my head, but the room spun violently. I let it drop back onto the pillow. Ellie. Oh, thank God. The face that loomed over me was not Nora's. It was Diane's. She looked perfect. Her hair was sprayed into a helmet of blonde, stiff waves. Her makeup flawless. Her blouse crisp and unwrinkled. She looked like she was attending a luncheon. Not sitting in a hospital room, Mom, I croaked. The word was barely a whisper. Shh, she said, patting my arm with a little too much force. Do not try to talk. You have been out for a long time. Sweetie, a long time. I tried to focus on the window. It was dark outside. Was it night? Which night? Where is Nora? I asked. Diane's face tightened. Just a fraction, a micro expression of distaste that vanished as quickly as it appeared. She smoothed the blanket over my legs. Nora had to work. Diane said, she could not stay. We have been here the whole time. Ellie, every minute. That did not make sense. Nora had taken the week off. Nora would not leave me. I need my phone, I said. Victor stepped into my line of sight. He was wearing his good suit, the navy one he wore to funerals and meetings with his accountant. He looked tired, but there was an energy coming off him, a buzzy, frantic sort of vibration. Rest now, Victor said. We put your things away for safekeeping. You do not need to worry about anything. We handled the paperwork. Paperwork. My brain was firing slowly, like an engine turning over in sub-zero temperatures. What paperwork? The surgery was over. The intake forms were signed. I want my phone, I said again, trying to put force behind the words. But it came out as a whine. Later, Diane said soothingly. She picked up a plastic cup of water with a straw and held it to my lips. Drink. You are dehydrated. I turned my head away. I tried to sit up. Pushing against the mattress with my weak arms, a sharp pain tore through my abdomen, and I gasped. Careful, Diane cried. You had complications. Ellie, you cannot move around yet. Complications. You had a reaction to the anesthesia, Victor said. His voice was grim, authoritative. They had to keep you under. You have been sedated for 5 days. 5 days. The words hit me like a physical blow. 5 days. I had lost 5 days of my life. I had been drifting in the black water for nearly a week. And you were here, I asked. Of course we were here, Diane said, looking hurt. We are your parents. When we heard, well, we came immediately. How did you hear? I asked. Nora. Nora was overwhelmed. Victor interrupted. He waved a hand dismissively. She is just a friend. Ellie. She could not make the hard decisions. The doctors needed family. They needed us. Hard decisions. The phrase hung in the air, ominous and heavy. I felt a spike of panic, sharp and cold, cut through the drug haze. What decisions? What had they done? I need to see the nurse. I said, they are busy. Diane said, now. I said, I reached for the call button clipped to the side of the bed. Diane's hand shot out and intercepted mine. Her grip was strong. Ellie, stop it, she hissed. You are making a scene. We are taking care of you. Why do you always have to fight us? I am not fighting, I said, my voice trembling. I just want to know what happened. The door pushed open, and a nurse walked in. She was young, looking harried, holding a tablet. She stopped when she saw me awake, and then she looked at my parents. There was a weird tension in the look, a hesitation. Oh, you are up, the nurse said. She moved to the other side of the bed, away from Diane. How is your pain level? I ignored the question. I want my phone, I said to her. And I want to see Nora Klein. The nurse glanced at Victor. Victor stood straighter, puffing out his chest. She is still very confused. Victor said to the nurse, the doctor said this would happen. Delirium. I am not delirious, I snapped. Though the room was tilting again, I want to know why my parents are here when I explicitly listed Nora as my contact. The nurse bit her lip. She looked at the tablet, then back at me. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes have been very involved. There were some issues with reaching Ms. Klein initially, and given the emergency nature of the complications, she trailed off. It was a non-answer. It was the kind of answer people gave when they had been bullied into submission. I looked at Diane. She was smiling at the nurse, a tight, benevolent smile. She is just upset, Diane said. She has always been high-strung. We are handling it. I closed my eyes. I was too weak to fight them right now. I needed to clear my head. I needed the drugs to wear off. Can I just have some water? I asked. The nurse poured fresh water. I drank it, letting the cool liquid soothe my throat. I lay back. Feigning sleep, I watched them through my eyelashes. Diane and Victor moved away from the bed. Toward the window, they spoke in hushed tones. But the room was quiet, and sound carried. "Buyer is pushing for the date," Victor whispered. "We can't do it until she is discharged." Diane whispered back. "It is already signed. Diane, it is done. We just need to clear the unit. Clear the unit." The words floated in my mind. Abstract and nonsensical. Maybe I was delirious. Maybe I was dreaming. I drifted again. Time was slippery. When I woke up the next time, the light had changed. It was morning. The sun was streaming in, harsh and bright, and Nora was there. She was standing at the foot of the bed, arguing with a large man in a security uniform. Diane was standing behind the guard, arms crossed, looking triumphant. "She is not up for visitors," Diane was saying. "I am not a visitor. I am her health proxy," Nora shouted. Her hair was messy, pulled back in a chaotic bun, and she was wearing the same clothes she had dropped me off in. She looked exhausted. "Nora!" I rasped. Nora's head snapped toward me. She pushed past the guard. He made a move to grab her, but she sidestepped him and rushed to the side of the bed. "Ellie." "Oh my God." She grabbed my hand. Her hand was shaking. "I have been trying to get in here for 3 days," Nora said, her voice thick with tears. "They blocked me. They told security I was harassing the family." I looked at Diane. "How could you?" Diane sniffed. She was causing a disturbance. "Ellie, look at her. She is hysterical. We were just trying to keep the environment calm for your recovery. Get out," I said to Diane. "Ellie, get out," I screamed at this time. The exertion made my stomach tear with pain. But I did not care. The security guard looked uncomfortable. He looked at Diane. "Ma'am, if the patient wants you to leave." Diane glared at me. Her eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth she had faked for the staff. "Fine," she said. "We will go get some breakfast. We will be back when you are being reasonable." She grabbed her purse and marched out. Victor followed her, but not before shooting a look at Nora, a look of pure, unadulterated smugness. When the door closed, Nora collapsed into the chair. "Jesus. Ellie," she said, "I thought you were dead. The hospital wouldn't tell me anything. They just said, 'Family is with her.' I called a lawyer, but without the paperwork. I signed the paperwork." I whispered. "I know," Nora said. "But your dad, he did something. He talked to the hospital administrator. He claimed you were mentally incapacitated by the reaction and that I was... God. He told them I was your drug dealer or something. He spun some insane story to get the override." I stared at the ceiling. The tiles were speckled with gray dots. "They were talking about a buyer," I said. When I was half asleep, they said they needed to clear the unit. Nora went still. She reached into her bag. "Ellie," she said quietly, "I went to your condo yesterday to feed the cat, and my key didn't work." My heart stopped. It literally stopped beating for a second. "What do you mean?" "I mean the lock was changed. There was a lockbox on the door. A realtor's lockbox." I tried to sit up again. The panic was clawing at my throat. "Where is my phone?" I asked. "Nora. Find my phone." Nora stood up and started rifling through the drawers of the bedside table. Empty. She checked the closet. Empty. "They took it." She said. "They must have it. Check the bag," I said, pointing to the plastic patient belongings bag on the counter. Nora ripped it open. My clothes were there, my wallet, but no phone. "Wait," Nora said. She dug into her own pocket and pulled out her phone. "Use mine. Log into your email." My fingers were clumsy, numb at the tips. I took Nora's phone. The screen was bright. I navigated to my email provider. I typed in my username. I typed in my password. Incorrect password. I typed it again. Carefully. Incorrect password. My hands started to shake uncontrollably. "They changed it." I whispered, "Try the recovery." Nora said. I hit the forgot password link. Recovery code sent to phone number ending in 88. That was my dad's number. Oh my God. I said, Ellie, look at this. Nora said. She was looking at the notification screen on her phone. She held it up. I squinted. It was a Zillow alert. I had set them up years ago for my building, just to track the value of my investment. Unit 3B, 410 Mill Street. Status pending. Unit 3B. That was my door number. That's a mistake. I said. I felt sick, physically sick. Nora was typing furiously. She pulled up the listing. It says, cash offer accepted. Quick close. I felt the room closing in. The walls were shrinking. My parents had sold my house while I was unconscious. How was that even possible? You can't sell a house without the owner. You need signatures. You need a notary. Unless they have a power of attorney, Nora said. Reading my mind. I never gave them one. I said, never. Then they forged it. Nora said. Her voice was flat, horrified. Suddenly, a ping sounded from the bedside table. We both froze. It came from the top drawer, the one Nora had checked. But she had checked the main compartment. There was a false bottom, a plastic tray for personal items. Nora yanked the drawer open and lifted the tray. My phone was there. It was turned off. They hid it. Nora whispered, Turn it on. I said. She pressed the button. The Apple logo appeared. It seemed to take hours to boot up. When the screen lit up, notifications flooded in. Dozens of missed calls from Nora, texts from work, and one email notification at the very top, from a sender I did not recognize, Hollis Pierce Realty Group. I tapped it. My vision was swimming. The words danced on the screen. Subject final, walkthrough complete. I opened the message. Dear Ms. Hayes, we are pleased to confirm that the final walkthrough was successful. The buyers are excited to take possession. Funds have been wired to the account provided. Congratulations on closing. I read it twice, 3 times. Congratulations on closing. I looked at Nora. She was pale. I looked out the window. At the fictional skyline of Marrow Glen, at the world that had continued to turn while I was erased. That is not possible, I whispered. But the phone was heavy in my hand, and the email was there, black ink on a white screen, telling me that my life no longer belonged to me. Discharge was a bureaucratic haze of wheelchair rides, printed instructions, and the persistent throbbing ache in my abdomen that felt less like healing and more like a warning. They handed me a packet of prescriptions and a plastic bag for my clothes. Nora was there, her jaw set tight, pushing the wheelchair with a militance that warned everyone to stay out of her way. My parents were not there. They had texted to say they were preparing the house for my arrival. The phrasing made my skin crawl. Preparing the house, as if my condo were a stage and they were the set designers. Nora drove me home in silence. The city of Marrow Glen rolled past the window, gray and indifferent. I watched the storefronts, the coffee shops, the people walking dogs, and I felt a profound sense of dislocation. I had been gone for a week, but it felt like I had fallen out of the timeline entirely. When we pulled up to the converted mill, I looked up at the 3rd floor. My windows were dark. Do you want me to come up? Nora asked as she parked. I need to see it first, I said. I need to see what they did. I walked slowly to the elevator, leaning heavily on Nora. My center of gravity felt wrong, shifted by the trauma to my body. When we reached my door number 3B, I hesitated. The lockbox was gone. My parents must have removed it before I arrived. I put my key in the lock. It turned with a smooth, familiar click. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. It was not the smell of my home coffee, old books, and the vanilla candle I burned on Sundays. It smelled of chemical lemon and aggressive floral spray. It smelled like a hotel room that was trying too hard to convince you it was clean. I stepped inside. The furniture was there, but it was wrong. My throw blanket, usually draped over the back of the couch, was folded into a perfect, rigid square. The stack of magazines on the coffee table was gone. My collection of ceramic coasters was aligned in a geometric grid. I walked into the kitchen. The counters were bare, my toaster, my coffee maker. My jar of wooden spoons all gone. "Where is my stuff?" I whispered. I opened the pantry door. Empty. I walked to the bedroom. Boxes. They were stacked against the far wall, taped shut, labeled in my mother's neat, looping handwriting: Ellie's clothes, decor, personal. My bed was made with white linens I did not own. The duvet was smoothed to a military precision. They staged it, Nora said, her voice echoing in the hollow room. They packed your life into boxes to make it look bigger for the buyers. I sat down on the edge of the strange, white bed. I felt dizzy. This was violence. It was quiet. Domestic violence. But it was violence all the same. They had erased me from my own sanctuary while I was bleeding on a surgical table. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A text from a number I did not know. Showing confirmed for tomorrow at 10 in the morning. Please ensure the unit is vacant. I stared at the screen. They are still showing it. I said, they think this is still happening. The front door opened. Diane and Victor walked in, carrying grocery bags. They stopped when they saw us. For a second, just a split second, I saw panic in Diane's eyes. Then she covered it with a wide, breathy smile. "Ellie, you are home early. We were just getting some soup for you." She bustled into the kitchen, setting the bags on the empty counter, acting as if the boxes in the bedroom did not exist. "Why is my house in boxes?" I asked. My voice was low, shaky. Victor closed the door and leaned against it. He looked weary, the grieving father who carried the weight of the world. "We had to move fast. Ellie," he said, "the market is volatile. We got a cash offer, 40,000 over asking. You should be thanking us for securing that kind of liquidity. I did not ask you to sell." I said, "I never said I wanted to sell." Diane came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a paper towel. "Ellie, be realistic," she said. Her tone was the one she used when I was a teenager and wanted to go to art camp instead of computer science summer school. "You have a long recovery ahead of you. You might need home care. You might have long-term complications. How are you going to pay for that?" "I have insurance," I said. "I have savings. Hospital bills are astronomical," Victor said, stepping forward. He loomed over the living room, his presence filling the space. "The surgery was more complex than you thought. Do you want to bankrupt us? Because that is what happens. Ellie, children get sick, and parents spend their retirement saving them. We just made sure there was money in the bank to cover you." "Bankrupt you?" I asked. "I am 33. My bills are my bills. And when you can't work," Diane shot back, "when you lose your job because you are recovering for months, then who pays the mortgage?" "We do. We are just protecting ourselves. And you?" It was a masterful performance. They took the theft of my home and twisted it until it looked like charity. They made me the burden, the potential financial ruin, and themselves the martyrs who had made the hard choice. I looked at Nora. She was recording the conversation on her phone, holding it discreetly against her leg. "I want you to leave," I said. "Ellie, you are being hysterical," Diane said. "You can't be alone. Nora is staying." I said, "Get out, and take your soup." Victor's face hardened. He looked at the boxes, then at me. "We will go," he said, "but the closing is in 3 days. You need to be out by then. We rented you a nice apartment near us, ground floor. Easier for you." He dropped a set of keys on the empty counter. The metal clatter sounded like a gunshot. "Come on, Diane," Victor said. "Let her pout. She will understand when she sees the hospital bill." They left. The silence they left behind was heavy and suffocating. I did not sleep that night. I lay on the white sheets, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator in the empty kitchen. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the darkness of the anesthesia, felt the helplessness of the void. The next morning, the sun rose gray and bleak. I sat at the kitchen island. Nora had dragged a stool out of the closet and opened my laptop. "I need to see my accounts," I said. "I need to see if they touched my savings." I went to my bank's website. My username was saved. I typed in my password. Login failed. I tried again. Login failed. My hands started to tremble. I clicked forgot password. A recovery code has been sent to vase_consulting@gmail.com. I stared at the masked email address. Hayes. Victor Hayes. He changed the recovery email. I said, I felt the bile rise in my throat. He locked me out. Nora was sitting on the floor, surrounded by papers. She had spent the morning on the phone with the hospital billing department and my insurance provider. Ellie, listen to me. She said. I looked down at her. I got the preliminary itemized bill. She said, and I talked to your insurance rep. Your out-of-pocket maximum is $5,000. I blinked. 5,000, yes, Nora said. And you have 15,000 in your emergency fund. I know because I helped you set it up. So the bill? I started. The bill is covered. Nora said, completely covered, even with the complications. Insurance is picking up 90%. And you have enough savings to cover the rest 3 times over. The room seemed to tilt. They lied. I said, they did not just lie. Nora said, her voice sharp, they invented a crisis. There is absolutely no financial reason to sell this condo. None. They are not protecting you from bankruptcy. They are liquidating your assets for a reason that has nothing to do with medical bills. I looked at the keys Victor had left on the counter. The apartment keys. Near them, under their thumb, with $400,000 of my money sitting in an account they controlled. I stood up. A sharp pain ripped through my incision, but I ignored it. I need to go to the realtor. I said, Ellie, you can barely walk. Nora said, I don't care. I said, take me to Hollis and Pierce. The realty office was in a strip mall on the nicer side of Marrow Glen, sandwiched between a boutique coffee shop and a yoga studio. It had large glass windows and photos of smiling families taped to the display. I walked in, leaning on Nora, wearing sweatpants and a loose hoodie to hide the surgical binder around my waist. The receptionist looked up, her smile faltering when she saw my pale, sweaty face. Can I help you? She asked. I need to speak to the agent handling the Hayes sale. I said, Unit 3B at the mill. Oh, that is Mr. Sterling, she said. Let me see if he is available. She made a call. A moment later, a man in a sharp gray suit walked out. He looked like he was made of hair gel and ambition. Ms. Hayes, he asked, looking at Diane, who wasn't there. Then he looked at me. Oh, you are the daughter. I am the owner. I said, Mr. Sterling's smile was tight. Well, technically, yes, until Friday. Your parents said you might stop by. They mentioned you were having a hard time letting go. I stared at him. He thought this was sentimental. He thought I was a bratty child clinging to a toy. I want to see the seller authorization. I said, Mr. Sterling sighed. He checked his watch. Ms. Hayes, everything is in order. We have the digital records. I want to see the paper. I said, the one with my signature on it. He hesitated, then gestured for us to follow him to a small glass-walled office. He sat down at his desk and tapped on his computer. I can show you the scan. He said, the originals are with the title company. He turned the monitor toward me. There it was, a document authorizing the sale of 410 Mill Street, Unit 3B, and at the bottom, a signature, Ellie Marie Hayes. I stared at it. The ink was black. The loops were large. That is not my signature. I said, Mr. Sterling chuckled dryly. It looks like the one on your driver's license copy we have on file. No, I said. Look at the middle name. He frowned. Marie. I don't use my middle name. I said, I haven't used my middle name on a legal document since I was 18. I sign everything as Ellie Hayes. Just Ellie Hayes. I pointed to the screen. And look at the slant. I said, that signature leans to the left. I am right-handed. My signature leans to the right. Mr. Sterling pulled the monitor back. He studied the screen. The smugness was starting to crack, replaced by the wary look of a man realizing his commission might be in danger. Ms. Hayes, this document was notarized. He said, if you have a dispute with your parents. That is a family matter. We have a legal contract. It is a fraudulent contract. I said, I was under general anesthesia on October 14th. The date this was signed, I was physically incapable of holding a pen. Mr. Sterling stiffened. I will have to call our legal department. You do that, I said, and tell the buyers the sale is contested. I walked out. I held my head high until we got to the parking lot, and then I collapsed against the side of Nora's car, gasping for air. The pain in my stomach was a hot, tearing sensation. Ellie? I looked up. Victor and Diane were parking their sedan 2 spots away. They must have been tracking my phone. Or maybe Mr. Sterling had called them the second I walked in. They marched over. Diane looked furious. Victor looked dangerous. What are you doing? Diane hissed. Looking around to see if anyone was watching. You are embarrassing us. Mr. Sterling just texted Victor. You went in there and accused us of fraud. I accused you of what you did. I said, I didn't sign that paper. Victor stepped into my personal space. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, and he used his size to intimidate. You were drugged, Ellie, he said, his voice low and hard. You were on high doses of pain medication. You don't remember half of what happened that week. I remember enough. I said, You remember nothing, Victor said. You begged us to handle it. You were crying, saying you couldn't handle the stress, saying you wanted to start over. We did exactly what you asked. He was gaslighting me. He was rewriting my memory in real time, banking on the fact that the anesthesia had left holes in my timeline. I didn't ask you to sell my house, I said, but my voice wavered. The doubt was a seed he knew exactly how to plant. Had I said something, had I mumbled something in the recovery room, Victor saw the hesitation. He smiled. A cold, thin expression. See? You are confused. You're unwell. Go back to the condo. Ellie, pack your things. Do not make us declare you incompetent, because if you keep pushing this, we will have to tell the court you are mentally unstable, and with your medical chart right now, they will believe us. He grabbed Diane's arm and led her away. I stood there, shivering in the mild autumn air. Nora drove us to a diner. She ordered me herbal tea and fries I couldn't eat. We need to find the notary. I said, Mr. Sterling said it was notarized. Who is the notary? Nora pulled up the photo she had snapped of Mr. Sterling's screen when he wasn't looking. Maribel Quent. She read, Mobile notary? Look her up. Nora typed on her phone. Here she is. Yelp reviews are interesting. Fast service, doesn't ask questions. Met me in a parking lot at midnight. Call her, I said. Nora called. She put it on speaker. Quent Notary. A raspy voice answered. Hi, I am calling about a notarization you did on October 14th for Ellie Hayes. Nora said. There was a pause. Who is this? This is Ellie Hayes, I said, leaning toward the phone. I'm looking at my signature on a document you stamped. I was in a medically induced coma on October 14th. I want to know how you verified my identity. The line went silent for a long time. Look, lady, the woman said, her voice defensive. I followed protocol. The gentleman provided a driver's license. Did you see me, I asked. Did I sign the book in front of you? He sent a photo of the license, the woman said, and a video of you. Nodding. It was a remote verification. It is legal in some states. Not here, I said. And not if I was unconscious. I verify identity. The woman snapped. I don't verify medical charts. Don't call me again. She hung up. A video of me nodding. I closed my eyes. They must have filmed me in the hospital bed. Maybe when I was drifting in and out, asking me vague questions. Ellie. Are you okay, Ellie? Do you trust us? And I had nodded, and they had used that. The cruelty of it took my breath away. They had weaponized my vulnerability. The next 2 days were a blur of pain and phone calls. I couldn't sleep. Every time I drifted off, I woke up gasping, convinced someone was in the room. The pain in my abdomen was constant, a dull roar that spiked whenever I moved. But the betrayal hurt worse. It was a physical ache in my chest, a hollowed-out feeling. These were the people who had taught me to tie my shoes. These were the people who were supposed to be my safety net. Instead, they were the predators. I need proof. I told Nora on the second day, I need to know exactly what they told the hospital to get access to me. We went back to Marrow Glen Medical Pavilion. I asked to see a patient advocate. Caleb Dre was a young man with a gentle demeanor and a messy desk. He listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, he looked troubled. "Let me pull your access logs," he said. He typed for a few minutes. Then he stopped. "Here it is," he said. He turned the screen. There was a note dated October 13th, the day of my surgery. Patient's parents, Diane and Victor Hayes, requesting full medical power of attorney. No document on file. Parents state patient is verbally non-responsive, but gave verbal consent prior to procedure. Staff note: parents very persistent. Doctor: Aris approved updates to family due to critical nature of complications. But look here, Caleb said, pointing to a line further down. October 15th. Nurse T. Miller note: patient's friend Nora Klein attempted to visit. Parents blocked access. Parents claiming Klein is a bad influence and drug-seeking. Security called. And then, the smoking gun. October 16th. Social work note: conflict observed between parents and nursing staff. Mother demanding nurses not speak to patient about outside matters. Father asking for patient's belongings, specifically keys and wallet, for safekeeping. Request denied initially, then approved by floor supervisor after parents threatened legal action. They bullied their way in. Caleb said softly, "They used the emergency to bypass your privacy settings. And this," he pointed to a scanned document in the file. It was a handwritten note on hospital letterhead. I, Victor Hayes, assume responsibility for Ellie Hayes's personal property. It was dated October 16th. "Can I have copies of all of this?" I asked. Caleb nodded. "I will print it. And Ellie, if you need a statement, I will write one. You were clear about your wishes during intake. We failed you by letting them override that." I walked out of the hospital with a thick manila envelope. I felt heavier, but also sharper. I was not crazy. I was not misremembering. I had been hijacked. When I got back to the condo, my condo, for 2 more days there was a stack of mail on the counter. Nora had brought it in from the mailbox. It was mostly junk mail, flyers for pizza and internet deals. But there was one envelope that caught my eye. It was a large white envelope, forwarded from an old address I hadn't used in 10 years. The yellow forwarding sticker was peeling. The envelope itself was ripped, as if it had been caught in a sorting machine. I picked it up. It was addressed to Ellie Hayes. I opened it. It was a property tax statement. County of Briarwick. Tax Collector's Office. Property address: 882 Pine Hollow Road. Briarwick. Owner of record Ellie Hayes. I stared at it. Briarwick was a rural county 3 hours north. I had never been to Briarwick. I certainly didn't own property there. I looked at the amount due. $2,400. I looked at the assessment. Single-family residence, 1,200 square feet. I sat down on the stool. "What is it?" Nora asked, looking up from her laptop. I held out the paper. "I own a house," I said. "What?" Nora asked. "You mean the condo?" "No." I said, "I own a house, in Briarwick." I looked at the date on the tax bill. It was for the current year, but the owner's since date was 7 years ago. I had owned a house for 7 years, and I had no idea. I looked at the ripped envelope again, and then I looked at the pile of boxes my parents had packed. "They want the money from the condo." I whispered, "But why are they so desperate? They aren't poor." I looked at the tax bill. "Unless this is the real secret," I said. I ran my thumb over the address. 882 Pine Hollow Road. "What is this?" I asked the empty room. The question hung in the air, unanswered. But for the first time since I woke up from the anesthesia, I felt something other than fear. I felt the beginning of a hunt. My parents had sold my home to cover a secret. They had locked me out of my accounts to keep me blind. But they had missed one piece of mail. I looked at Nora. "Pack a bag," I said. "We are going to Briarwick." The drive to Briarwick County took 3 hours, winding north away from the gray skyline of Marrow Glen into a landscape of dense pines and roads that had not been paved since the 90s. Every bump in the asphalt sent a shockwave through my surgical incision. I sat in the passenger seat of Nora's car, clutching a pillow against my stomach. watching the bars on my cell phone drop from 4 to 1. We did not talk much. The revelation of the tax bill had sucked the air out of the car. I owned a house. I had owned a house for 7 years. The sentence replayed in my mind like a corrupted audio file. Skipping and repeating, refusing to make sense. Turn left here, the GPS voice instructed, sounding oddly cheerful given we were driving into the middle of nowhere. Nora slowed the car. The road turned to gravel. We crunched down a long tree-lined driveway that opened up into a clearing, and there it was. It was not a ruin, but it was not a palace either. It was a modest, single-story craftsman bungalow with white siding that had faded to a dusty cream. There was a porch that wrapped around 2 sides, holding a swing that hung crookedly on rusted chains. The yard was overgrown but not wild. Someone had mowed the grass recently. Though the edges were shaggy with dandelion and crabgrass, Nora put the car in park. "This is it," she said. 882 Pine Hollow Road. I unbuckled my seatbelt, wincing as the strap retracted. I opened the door and stepped out onto the gravel. The air smelled different here, sharp with pine needles and damp earth. It was quiet. A bird called out from the woods, a lonely, piercing sound. I walked toward the mailbox at the end of the drive. It was a standard metal box on a wooden post, slightly leaning. On the side, painted in black stenciled letters that had begun to chip, was a name, Hayes. I reached out and touched the cold metal. It was not my parents' house. It was not my condo, but my name was on the mailbox. It felt like walking into a dream where the geography is familiar but wrong. "I wondered when you would come." The voice came from the left. I jumped, gasping as my abdominal muscles seized in protest. An older woman was standing at the edge of the property line, separated from the bungalow's yard by a low stone wall. She was wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and holding a pair of garden shears. She looked to be in her late 60s, her face mapped with deep lines, her eyes sharp and blue. "I am sorry," I said, breathless from the pain and the startle. "I didn't see you." The woman didn't smile, but her expression wasn't hostile. It was curious. She stepped over the low wall, wiping her hands on her apron. "You have her eyes," the woman said. "Mara's eyes. Mara." The name unlocked a memory I had pushed into the basement of my mind. Aunt Mara. My father's older sister, the one who stopped coming to Christmas dinners when I was 12. The one my mother called unstable and difficult. She had died 4 years ago. I remembered Victor going to the funeral alone, claiming it was a small service and I didn't need to take time off work. "I am Ellie," I said. "Mara was my aunt." "I know," the woman said. "I am Lenora Pike. I live next door. Your aunt used to sit on that porch swing and smoke those terrible clove cigarettes and tell me, 'One day Ellie will show up. She will show up when it is time. When it is time for what I asked.'" Mrs. Pike shrugged. "She didn't say. She just said you would need a place to land." I looked back at the house. It looked empty. The windows were dark, reflecting the clouds passing overhead. "Does someone live here?" I asked. "The grass is mowed." "Mr. Gentry comes by twice a month." "Mrs. Pike said. "He is a handyman from town. He says the check's clear. So he keeps cutting." "Who pays him a family representative?" Mrs. Pike said. She looked at me closely. "You don't know, I don't know anything," I said truthfully. "I didn't know this house existed until yesterday." Mrs. Pike made a humming sound in her throat. "Well, that sounds about right for Mara. She liked her secrets, but she loved you. You know, she had a photo of you on her fridge, a graduation picture." I felt a sting of tears. I had not invited Mara to my college graduation. My parents had told me she was in a facility, drying out. "Do you have a key?" I asked. "No," Mrs. Pike said, "but Gentry might, or the lawyer." Mara never did anything without a lawyer. We thanked Mrs. Pike and got back in the car. I felt shaken. My parents had erased Mara from my life, painting her as a cautionary tale of addiction and madness. But she had been here, waiting for me. She had left a light on for me, even from the grave. "We need to go to the county clerk." I said to Nora, "I need to see the deed." The Briarwick County Administrative Building was a brick structure that smelled of floor polish and old paper. The clerk was a bored-looking man who pointed us to a row of computers. I searched for Hayes. The results populated the screen. Deed of transfer. Grantor Mara Elizabeth Hayes. Grantee Ellie Marie Hayes. Date August 12, 2017. 2017. 7 years ago. I clicked on the document. It was a standard warranty deed. Mara had transferred the property to me for the sum of $10. But there was a second page. Managed by Ridgeway Fiduciary Services. Trustee. I printed the pages. The printer hummed and spat out the warm paper. I held the proof in my hands. I owned a house, a whole house, free and clear, managed by a trust I knew nothing about. Nora looked over my shoulder. Ridgeway Fiduciary. That sounds corporate. It sounds like a wall. I said, a wall my parents couldn't climb. I walked out into the sunlight and pulled out my phone. My hand was shaking, not from cold, but from rage. I dialed my mother's number. She answered on the second ring. Ellie, where are you? We went to the condo and you were gone. You are not supposed to be driving. I am in Briarwick. I said. The silence on the other end was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum, sucking all the oxygen out of the line. Diane, I said, why are you there? Her voice was different now. The faux concern was gone, replaced by a brittle, sharp edge. I got a tax bill, I said, for my house. The house Aunt Mara left me 7 years ago, the house you never told me about. Ellie, listen to me, Diane said. She was speaking fast, her words clipping together. That house is a ruin. It is a burden. Mara was not in her right mind when she signed those papers. We were trying to protect you. Protect me from what? From owning an asset. From having a safety net. From a money pit, Diane shouted. The mask was slipping. You have no idea what it costs to maintain a property like that. The taxes, the insurance, we handled it. We took care of it so you could focus on your career. We were doing you a favor. You hid it from me. I said, just like you are hiding the money from my condo. We are not hiding anything, Diane shrieked. We are managing your estate because you are clearly incapable of doing it yourself. Look at you, running off to some shack in the woods while you have surgical stitches in your stomach. You are manic. Ellie, you are unstable. I am not unstable, I said. My voice dropped dead calm. I am awake. I hung up. Nora was watching me. She called me manic. I said, Nora started the car. That is their new narrative. She said, they are building a case. Ellie, we need a lawyer. A real one. Not the one who drafted your condo closing. We drove back toward the city, but we didn't go home. We went to the office of Sloan Mercer. Nora had found her on a forum for victims of elder abuse and trust fraud. Sloan's office was in a glass high-rise downtown, a stark contrast to the sleepy dust of Briarwick. Sloan Mercer was a woman who looked like she was carved out of granite and dressed in Italian silk. She sat behind a desk that was completely empty except for a notepad and a fountain pen. She listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting. She looked at the tax bill. She looked at the deed. She looked at the email from the realtor. Then she leaned back and capped her pen. This is not a family dispute, Sloan said. Her voice was low and smoky. This is a coordinated asset strip. She turned her monitor so we could see. I did a quick search on the entity that bought your condo while you were speaking. Sloan said, Kestrel Strand Holdings. I nodded. The name sounded vague. Corporate. Kestrel Strand is a shell company. Sloan explained, they specialize in distressed assets. They buy properties for cash, usually at 60 or 70 cents on the dollar, and flip them within 30 days. But my condo wasn't distressed. I said, it was pristine. To the market, it was distressed. Sloan corrected, your parents listed it as an urgent cash sale. They accepted an offer that was $50,000 below market value. I felt sick. $50,000. They had thrown away a year of my salary just to move the money fast. Why, I asked. Why burn the value? Because speed was more important than profit. Sloan said, they needed the cash liquid and they needed the title out of your name before you woke up. or at least before you could stop them. She tapped the desk. People who think they are entitled will call theft management, she said. Your parents do not see this as stealing. They see you as an extension of themselves. Therefore, your property is their property. But the law sees it differently, especially the notarization. Sloane pulled up a file. I know Maribel Quent, the notary. She has lost her commission twice and got it back on appeal. She is sloppy. If we can prove you were incapacitated, we can void the deed, but the money is the problem. Once the wire hits Kestrel Strand, it is hard to claw back. She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much human greed. But the house in Briarwick, she said, that is interesting. Why hide a house if they wanted money? Why not sell that too? Maybe they couldn't. I said, it is in a trust. Exactly, Sloane said. Ridgeway Fiduciary Services. That is a heavy hitter. They don't mess around with fake notaries. If Ridgeway is the trustee, your parents couldn't touch the title. So they did the next best thing, what I asked. They suppressed the information. Sloane said, and they probably intercepted the mail. For 7 years. That requires dedication. Sloane stood up. I am going to file an emergency injunction to freeze the proceeds from the condo sale. She said, but I need more ammunition. I need to prove that your parents had a premeditated plan to defraud you. I have something, Nora said. She pulled out the file Caleb Dre had given us, the hospital logs. Sloane scanned the pages. Her eyebrows went up. This is gold, she said. Look at the timeline. She pointed to an entry. October 13th, 1700 hours. Victor Hayes inquired about patient's safe deposit box keys. That was 3 hours after you went into surgery. Sloane said, you were barely out of the operating room. He wasn't worried about your health. He was looking for your assets. And this, she pointed to another line. October 14th, 900 hours. Diane Hayes requested social worker to initiate disability paperwork. Disability. I asked. Sloane looked at me. They were trying to establish a record of incapacity from day one. This wasn't a reaction to your complications. Ellie, they were waiting for an opportunity. The surgery just gave them the window. We left Sloane's office with a plan. But my head was spinning. The betrayal was so calculated. It wasn't just that they wanted my money. It was that they had been waiting for years for a chance to take it. We checked into a cheap hotel on the outskirts of Marrow Glen. I couldn't go back to the empty condo. It felt like a crime scene. I lay on the hotel bed, my laptop open on my chest. The pain meds were making me fuzzy, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. Mara. Why had she left me the house? And why had she used a trust? I opened my Gmail. I went to the search bar. I typed Mara Hayes. The results were sparse. A few family reunion threads from a decade ago, but there was one email, buried in the archive, marked unread. Date November 3rd, 2017. Subject for your future. I stared at the date. It was 3 months after the deed had been recorded, 3 months before she died. I had never opened it. I remembered that time. I was 25, drowning in work, trying to please my parents, trying to prove I was successful. When I saw an email from Aunt Mara, the family pariah, I had sighed and archived it, thinking I would deal with her drama later. Later never came. I clicked the subject line, My dearest Ellie, if you are reading this, I am probably gone. I know your parents have told you I'm sick, or crazy, or both. Maybe I am, but I am not blind. I have watched how they treat you. I watched how they treated your brother before he left. They consume their children. Ellie, they take little bites until there is nothing left but a shell they can fill with their own needs. I am leaving you the house in Briarwick. I have put it in a trust so they cannot sell it. Ridgeway has strict instructions they are to communicate only with you. But I know Victor. He intercepts things. He controls the flow of information, so I am sending this to your personal email, hoping you see it. This house is your exit strategy. It is modest, but it is yours. It is a clean start. Be careful. Ellie, if anything happens to me, they will try to erase what I left you. Don't let them. Love, Aunt Mara. Tears were streaming down my face, hot and fast. She had known. She had seen the dynamic I was too young and too brainwashed to see. They consumed their children. There was an attachment, a PDF. I opened it. It was a scanned letter from the trust officer at Ridgeway. It outlined the terms of the trust. The property at 882 Pine Hollow Road is held in trust for the benefit of Ellie Marie Hayes. Upon her taking residence or assuming ownership, the trust shall also disburse a stipend for maintenance and taxes. I read on. The legalese was dense, but then I hit a paragraph that made my blood freeze. Clause 4B, contingency of capacity. In the event that the beneficiary Ellie Marie Hayes is deemed mentally incompetent or unable to manage her own affairs by a court of law or 2 licensed physicians, the control of the trust asset and any associated funds shall transfer to the appointed family guardian. I read it again. Associated funds. I scrolled down. There was a balance sheet attached to the bottom of the PDF. Trust principal balance, $350,000. I gasped. The sound woke Nora, who had dozed off in the chair. What Nora asked. What is it? I turned the laptop toward her. It is not just a house, I whispered. Aunt Mara left me money. Real money. $350,000 to maintain the property and give me a life. Nora scanned the document. Then her eyes widened as she read Clause 4B. Oh my God. She said, the puzzle pieces slammed together, the rush to sell the condo, the constant talk of my instability, the staged mental breakdown story at the hospital, the disability paperwork Diane asked for. They don't just want the $400,000 from your condo, Nora said, her voice filled with horror. No, I said. I looked at the screen, at the words, family guardian. If they can prove I am incompetent, if they can use my post-surgery confusion and their own lies to get a conservatorship, they get control of everything. The condo money, the Briarwick house, and the $350,000 in Mara's trust. They are trying to declare me unfit. I said. I closed the laptop. The click sounded like a gavel. They weren't saving me from bankruptcy. They were manufacturing a mental health crisis to unlock a fortune. They were going to lock me away, medicate me into silence, and live off the inheritance Mara meant for my freedom. I looked at Nora. Call Sloan. I said, tell her to file the injunction, and tell her we are going to war. We returned to the condo the next morning. It was a tactical decision. We had to be there to intercept the closing packet before the final courier pickup, and frankly, I was done hiding in a motel while my parents played house with my assets. The unit was silent when we entered. The air still smelled of that aggressive floral spray, a chemical mask over the scent of my life. I sat on the sofa, which was now draped in a plastic sheet, and waited. Nora sat at the kitchen island, her laptop open. The camera on her phone angled discreetly toward the living room. They arrived at 10 o'clock sharp. I heard the key turn in the lock, my key, the one they had refused to return, and the door swung open. Victor walked in first, carrying a thick manila folder. Diane followed, holding a tray of muffins as if this were a Sunday brunch and not a hostage negotiation. They stopped when they saw me. Ellie, Diane said, her voice pitching up into that brittle, cheerful register she used when neighbors were watching. We didn't know you were coming back today. Look, I brought blueberry muffins. She set the tray on the counter, ignoring Nora completely. Victor didn't smile. He closed the door and locked it. He walked to the center of the room and placed the folder on the coffee table. We need to talk. Ellie, he said. I looked at the folder. It was thick, ominous, about what I asked. My voice was steady, practiced. I had spent the morning rehearsing this with Sloan Mercer. Don't explain. Don't defend. Just ask. About your future, Victor said. He sat in the armchair opposite me, spreading his legs, claiming the space. We know you are upset about the condo. We know you are confused. But we have been doing a lot of thinking, and we have consulted with some specialists. Specialists, I asked, people who understand what you are going through. Diane said, hovering behind him, the trauma, the anesthesia reaction, it changes brain chemistry. Ellie, It makes people impulsive, paranoid, like thinking your parents stole your house, I asked. Diane sighed. A sound of profound martyrdom. See, this is what we mean. The aggression, the delusion. You are not yourself. Sweetie, you are sick, and we cannot let you ruin your financial future because you are having a temporary episode. Victor tapped the folder. We have a solution, he said. A simple solution. He opened the folder and slid a document toward me. Voluntary Asset Management and Guardianship Agreement. I read the title. It wasn't a court order. It was a contract. What is this, I asked. It is a temporary measure, Victor said, his voice smooth. Reasonable. It just gives us the legal authority to manage your finances and medical decisions for the next 12 months. Just until you are back on your feet. It stops the bleeding. Ellie, it lets us finish the sale. Put the money in a trust for you, and make sure you have the care you need without you having to worry about bills or signatures. I scanned the first page. It gave them power to liquidate assets, power to access all accounts, power to choose my residence. And if I don't sign, I asked. Victor's face didn't change, but the temperature in the room dropped. Then we have to do it the hard way, he said. We have the medical records. Ellie, we have the logs of you being disoriented. We have the testimony of the hospital staff about your erratic behavior. If we go to court, it will become public record. Your employer will know. Your friends will know. He leaned forward. We are trying to save your dignity, he said. I looked at Diane. She was nodding, her eyes wide and wet with unshed tears. Please, Ellie, she whispered. Let us help you. You are drowning. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. Right alongside the surgical pain. They were so good at this. They had taken my physical weakness and built a cage out of it. I picked up the document. I need to read this. I said, alone. You can read it here. Victor said, I need my lawyer to read it. I said, Diane stiffened. You don't need a lawyer. Ellie, lawyers just want your money. This is a family agreement. I stood up. The movement hurt, but I kept my face blank. I am not signing anything today. I said. Victor stood up too. He was 6 feet tall, a wall of indignant fatherhood. You are making a mistake, he said. You are not thinking clearly. I am thinking more clearly than I have in years. I said. I looked him in the eye. Did you know about the Briarwick house, I asked? The reaction was microscopic, but it was there. A twitch in his jaw. A flicker of his eyes to the left. What house, he asked. The house Aunt Mara left me. I said. Diane made a noise, a sharp intake of breath. Mara was insane. Diane snapped. She didn't have anything to leave anyone. She died with nothing. Then why did I get a tax bill? I asked. Victor grabbed the folder off the table. This conversation is over, he said. You are clearly hallucinating. We will give you 24 hours to consider the agreement. If you don't sign, we will file for emergency conservatorship on Monday morning. He marched to the door. Diane followed, pausing to look at me with an expression that was almost pitying. Drop this, Ellie, she said softly. You are small. You have no idea how big this world is. You are going to get hurt. They left. The door clicked shut. Nora let out a breath she had been holding for 10 minutes. I got it all, she said, holding up her phone. Every word. The threat to go to your employer. The admission that they want control. Send it to Sloan. I said. My hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Send it all. The next stop was Ridgeway Fiduciary Services. Sloan had set up the appointment, bypassing the gatekeepers. The office was in a granite building in the financial district, the kind of place that smelled of money and silence. We sat in a conference room with polished mahogany tables. A woman in a gray suit entered. She was the compliance officer. She looked at my ID, then at me, then back at my ID. Ms. Hayes, she said slowly. I am confused. Why, I asked. Because you were here last week, she said. Or, someone who said she was you. My stomach dropped. I was in the hospital last week. I said. I was physically unable to leave my bed. The woman opened a file. We received a call on October 16th. She said, the caller identified herself as Ellie Hayes. She provided your social security number and your mother's maiden name. She asked for a disbursement of the trust principal for medical emergency. Did you authorize it? I asked. No, the woman said. Our protocols require an in-person signature for anything over $10,000. The caller became agitated. She said she was bedridden and couldn't come in. She asked if she could send a representative. Her father. And what did you say? We said no. The woman said, the trust explicitly states that the beneficiary must be the one to engage with us, unless there is a court order of incapacity. She paused, looking at me with new understanding. The caller asked what was required to prove incapacity. She said, I felt the blood drain from my face. She asked for the roadmap. I whispered, she asked you how to lock me up, so she could get the money. The woman nodded gravely. We flagged the account. But Ms. Hayes, if they have your social security number and your mother's maiden name, they are my parents. I said, they have everything. I left Ridgeway with a copy of the call log. The timestamp on the call matched the time Diane had stepped out of my hospital room to get coffee. She had impersonated me while I was unconscious. She had tried to rob me using my own voice. We drove back to Briarwick the next day. I needed to see the house again. I needed to understand what I was fighting for. When we pulled into the driveway of 882 Pine Hollow Road, there was a car parked in front of the house, a battered sedan with a child seat in the back. My heart hammered against my ribs. Who is that? Nora asked. I don't know. I said, I got out of the car. A young woman came out onto the porch. She was wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked to be about my age, wearing jeans and a t-shirt. She looked tired. Can I help you? She called out, sounding wary. Hi, I said, walking toward the steps. I am the owner, Ellie Hayes. The woman froze. She looked at me, then at Nora, then back at me. No, she said, That's not right. The owner is Diane. Diane Hayes. Diane. I walked up the steps. Diane is my mother, I said, but the deed is in my name. Can I ask, do you live here? I rent here, the woman said. I have lived here for 2 years. 2 years. My parents had been renting out my house for 2 years. Can I see your lease? I asked. Please, I know this is weird. I know this is sudden, but I think I am being robbed. The woman hesitated, then nodded. She went inside and came back with a folder. Here, she said. I opened the lease agreement. It was a standard month-to-month rental contract. Landlord Diane Hayes, acting agent for Hayes Family Trust, tenant Sarah Miller, rent $1,200 per month, signature D. Hayes. I stared at the signature. It was Diane's jagged, impatient scrawl. Where do you send the rent? I asked. I Venmo it, Sarah said. To an account called Hayes Consulting. Hayes Consulting. 24 months, $1,200 a month. That was nearly $30,000. They had taken $30,000 of income that belonged to me. Income that could have helped me pay off my student loans, or fix my car, or just breathe a little easier. And they had done it while sitting at my dinner table, eating my food, criticizing my spending habits. Thank you, I said to Sarah. My voice sounded hollow. You don't have to worry. I'm not kicking you out, but don't send any more money to that account. Sarah looked terrified. Am I in trouble? No. I said, but they are. We drove back to Marrow Glen in silence. The scope of it was getting too big to hold in my head. It wasn't just a reaction to a medical crisis. It was a long con. They had been harvesting me for years. When we got back to the city, I had an email from Sloan. Urgent. Review attached. It was the closing packet for the condo. Sloan had subpoenaed it from the title company that morning. I opened the PDF on my phone. I scrolled past the purchase agreement, past the fake signature, to the disbursement instructions, wire instructions, Bank First National of Marrow Glen, account name Hayes Family Consulting, LC, routing number 021. There it was, the same entity Sarah paid her rent to, Hayes Family Consulting. It sounded so official, so professional, but I knew what it was. It was a funnel, a way to siphon my life into their pockets. They aren't putting it in a trust for me. I said to Nora, "They are wiring it directly to their business account." Nora looked at the screen. "That is theft, Ellie. That is straight-up grand larceny. And wire fraud," I added. "And forgery." My phone rang. It was Victor. I stared at the screen. The picture I had set for him years ago, a photo of us fishing when I was 10, flashed at me. He looked so happy in that photo. He looked like a dad who loved his daughter. I answered. I hit the record button on Sloane's app. "Hello? Victor?" I said. "Ellie," he said. His voice was low. Dangerous. "I just got a call from Mr. Sterling. He says you are threatening to block the sale." "I am not threatening," I said. "I am doing it. I filed the injunction an hour ago." There was a silence, a heavy, breathing silence. "You are making a grave mistake." Victor said, "I know about the consulting firm." "Dad," I said. I used the word dad like a weapon. "I know about Sarah Miller. I know about the rent checks. I know about the $30,000 you stole from me. You ungrateful little brat," he hissed. The mask was gone. The calm, paternal facade was incinerated. "We raised you. We fed you. That house was a ruin until we fixed it up. We deserve that money. It is reimbursement for 18 years of sacrifice." "Reimbursement?" I asked. "You think raising a child is a loan you call in? I think you owe us," he shouted. "And if you think you can stop us, you are wrong. You want to play hardball." "Fine. I will call your boss. I will call your pastor. I will tell them all about the pills." "What pills?" I asked, my hand tightening on the phone. "The oxycodone," Victor said. "The ones you are addicted to. The ones that are making you paranoid. I will tell them you are abusing your script. I will tell them you are unstable. I will destroy your reputation. Ellie, you will lose your job. You will lose your friends. No one will believe a junkie." I felt the blood drain from my face. I was taking the medication exactly as prescribed for a major abdominal surgery. But the accusation, it was a stain that didn't wash out. "You would destroy me to keep the money I asked." My voice broke. I hated that it broke. "I am doing what is necessary to protect this family." Victor said, "Sign the agreement, Ellie, or I will burn your life to the ground." He hung up. I sat there, the phone warm in my hand. I felt like I was going to throw up. "He is going to do it." I said to Nora, "He is going to smear me." "Let him try," Nora said fiercely. "We have the toxicology reports from the hospital. We have your clean record. And now, we have that recording." She pointed to the phone. "He just attempted extortion. Ellie. On tape." I looked at the recording. Duration 2:14. It was enough. I stood up. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked pale, tired. My eyes rimmed with red, but I didn't look like a victim anymore. I looked like a witness. We went to the courthouse. The Merrill Glen District Court was a brutalist concrete building that looked like a bunker. I walked through the metal detector, my stomach throbbing with every step. Sloane met us there. She had the paperwork ready. Emergency petition for temporary restraining order and freeze of assets. Plaintiff Ellie Marie Hayes. Defendants Victor Hayes, Diane Hayes, Hayes Family Consulting, LLC, Kestrel, Strand Holdings. "Are you ready?" Sloane asked. I looked at the names on the paper, my parents. "If I sign this, there is no going back," I said. Sloane looked at me with those granite eyes. "Ellie," she said, "they sold your house while you were unconscious. They stole your rent money for 2 years. They threatened to frame you as an addict. There is no back. The bridge is already burned. You are just standing in the ashes." She handed me the pen. I signed. My hand trembled. The lines of my signature shaky. But it was my signature. Not the forgery on the deed. Mine. The clerk stamped the documents. Filed. The sound echoed in the quiet room. We walked out. A sheriff's deputy was waiting by the door. He was an older man, thick around the middle. He nodded at Sloane. "You served them?" Sloane asked. "Just now," the deputy said. "At their residence." He looked at me. He took off his hat. "Ms. Hayes," he said. I read the complaint. I nodded, unable to speak. The deputy stepped closer. His voice was low. "I have seen a lot of domestic disputes," he said. "When it is strangers, it is just business. But when it is family, they fight dirtier. They know where all the soft spots are." "I know." I said. "You lock your doors," the deputy said, "and you keep that lawyer close. This is going to get ugly before it gets better." I walked down the courthouse steps. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the pavement. I felt stripped raw. I had exposed the rot in my family to the world. I had made it official. My phone buzzed. I looked at it. A voicemail. From Diane. I didn't want to listen to it. I wanted to throw the phone into the nearest sewer grate. But Sloane nodded. "Evidence," she said. I pressed play. I held the phone away from my ear, so Nora and Sloane could hear. Diane's voice filled the space between us. It was soft, gentle, the voice she used when she tucked me in as a child. "Ellie, baby, I just saw the sheriff. I can't believe you would do this to us. To your own mother." She paused. I heard her take a breath. A shaky, tearful breath. "We loved you so much. We tried so hard." Then, the tone shifted. It didn't get louder. It got colder. It turned into ice. "But you are making a mistake. You are looking at the small picture. The condo. The rent checks. You think that is what this is about?" She laughed. It was a dry, terrible sound. "Drop this. Ellie, drop it now. Or you will lose what you don't even know you have. You are pulling on a thread, and you have no idea what is going to unravel. Some things are buried for a reason." The voicemail ended. I stared at the phone. What you don't even know you have. The condo was the small picture. The $30,000 in rent was the small picture. What could be bigger than that? I looked at Sloane. She looked disturbed. That wasn't a threat about money. Sloane said, "No." I said, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. That was a threat about history. I looked back at the courthouse, at the statue of Lady Justice holding her scales. "What else do I have?" I whispered. The question hung in the cool evening air. Unanswered. But I knew one thing. Diane wasn't bluffing. There was another secret, a foundational lie, and I was about to dig it up. The court order came down on a Tuesday morning. It was a sterile piece of paper, stamped and signed by a judge I had never met, granting a temporary restraining order on the proceeds from the sale of my condo. The $425,000 minus the mortgage payoff was frozen in the escrow account of the title company. It was a victory. But it felt like holding a grenade that had not gone off yet. Sloane Mercer called me with the news. "We have the freeze," she said. "But we also have a response from your parents' attorney. They are claiming you are acting under undue influence and post-operative delirium. They are doubling down on the incapacity narrative. Let them," I said. I was sitting in the cheap hotel room, watching Nora steam a suit for me. I am not the one who forged a signature. The legal battle was one thing. The social battle was another. My phone blew up within an hour of the ruling. It started with my Aunt Linda, Diane's sister, sending a text that was just a string of praying hands emojis followed by, "Your mother is so worried. Please come home." Then came a voicemail from my cousin, asking if it was true that I had stopped taking my medication and was having a breakdown. They were spinning it. They were telling everyone I was crazy so that when the truth came out, nobody would believe the math. They were inoculating the family against the facts. I didn't answer anyone. I just blocked the numbers, one by one. It felt like amputation. "We need to keep moving," Sloane said when we met at her office later that day. "The freeze buys us time, but it doesn't win the war." I did some digging into Kestrel Strand Holdings. She pulled up a corporate registration document on her tablet. "Kestrel Strand is a generic LLC," she said, "but look at the registered agent. Arthur Vance." The name sounded familiar. "Vance," I said, "I know that name. He is a commercial real estate broker." Sloane said, "He specializes in quick liquidations, and 10 years ago, he was a partner in a venture called Hayes and Vance Consulting." My stomach turned over. He was my father's partner. I said. Sloane nodded. They weren't just business associates. They were friends. This wasn't a random buyer who saw a listing online. Ellie, this was a phone call. Victor called his buddy and said, "I need to dump a property fast and quiet." Vance set up the shell company to buy it. It was insider trading on my own life. They prearranged the price. I said, that is why it was $50,000 under market. It was a sweetheart deal for Vance in exchange for speed. And secrecy, Sloan added. Vance isn't going to ask questions about a shaky signature if he's getting a condo for a steal. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my chest. This wasn't panic anymore. It was clarity. I need to go back to the hospital. I said, why? Nora asked. We have the logs. I need the paper. I said, I need to see the physical paper Victor signed to take my things. Because if he signed my name there too, we can prove a pattern. We drove to Marrow Glen Medical Pavilion. The sight of the building made my incision throb. A phantom echo of the trauma I had endured there. We went straight to the security office. This time, I didn't ask nicely. I slapped the court order on the desk. I am Ellie Hayes. I told the shift supervisor, I am currently in litigation regarding identity theft that occurred on these premises. I want the original property release form for patient room 412, dated October 16th. The supervisor, a burly man who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, disappeared into the back. He came out 10 minutes later with a clipboard. Here is the original, he said. I looked at it. Release of patient valuables. Items wallet, iPhone, house keys, apartment keys, release to Victor Hayes, patient authorization signature. I stared at the line. It was a scribble, a shaky, erratic line that looked vaguely like Ellie, but right below it, in the box marked Witness, was a signature I recognized. Victor Hayes. He signed as the witness to my signature. I said, the supervisor looked uncomfortable. The protocol says the patient has to sign. If the patient can't sign, 2 doctors have to sign off on the transfer. There are no doctor signatures here. I said, just my father witnessing a forgery he probably committed himself. I took a picture of the form. Caleb Dre met us in the hallway as we were leaving. He looked tired. I heard you were back, he said. Caleb, I said, I need to know something, and I need you to be honest, not professional. He nodded. Ask. When my mother was arguing with the staff, I said, when she was blocking Nora, what did she actually say? Caleb rubbed the back of his neck. She said you were easily manipulated. He said, she said Nora was trying to take advantage of you. She played the concerned mother card very well. Ellie, she made the staff feel like they were protecting you by keeping your friend out. But I asked. I could hear the but in his voice. But you were talking, Caleb said quietly. I stared at him. I was sedated. You were coming in and out. He said, it is common. You weren't making a lot of sense, but you were consistent. You kept asking for one thing. What Nora? Caleb said. You kept saying, where is Nora? You never asked for your parents. Not once. I felt tears prick my eyes. Even in the dark. Even in the void of anesthesia. My subconscious had known who was safe and who was not. Diane told the nurses you were calling for her. Caleb said, she lied to the staff about what you were saying. That is why I added the note about family conflict. I knew she was interpreting your words to suit her agenda. Thank you, I whispered. We left the hospital and went to the storage facility. My parents had moved my extra things there when I bought the condo, claiming I didn't have enough space. I had forgotten about the unit until Nora reminded me that my old tax records might be there. We drove to the U Store It on the edge of town. The code my father had given me years ago still worked. The metal gate rattled open. Unit 42 was dusty and smelled of mildew. It was filled with the detritus of my 20s college textbooks, winter coats, boxes of kitchenware I had upgraded. We started digging. I was looking for anything related to Aunt Mara, anything I had missed. It took an hour. Nora found it at the bottom of a box labeled Ellie, High School. It was a thick manila envelope, taped shut. It didn't have a postmark. It just had Ellie written on the front in Mara's looping script. I sat on a stack of old magazines and tore it open. Inside was a copy of the deed I had already seen, but clipped to it was a smaller, handwritten note on yellow legal paper. Ellie, if you are reading this, You found the house. Good. You are going to wonder why I did this, why I hid it, why I didn't just give it to you. I did it because your mother already took something else. She will tell you I'm crazy. She will tell you I'm jealous. But ask her about the savings bond. Ellie, ask her about the college fund Grandma left you, the one that vanished when you were 18. This house is yours because she already spent your first inheritance. Don't let her take this one too. Aunt Mara. I read the note 3 times. The college fund. I remembered that. I remembered asking about money for tuition, and Diane telling me, with a heavy sigh, that the market had crashed and the fund Grandma left had been wiped out. She had cried. She had said how sorry she was that I would have to take out loans. I had believed her. I had taken out $80,000 in student loans, working 2 jobs to pay the interest, believing that the economy had robbed me. But it wasn't the economy. It was Diane. I stood up. The rage was a physical thing now, a heat in my blood that burned away the pain. We are going to see them, I said. Now Nora asked, right now. I said, we drove to my parents' house, the house with the manicured lawn and the refinanced mortgage. I didn't knock. I used the key I still had on my ring, the one they hadn't managed to take. I walked in. Diane was in the kitchen, arranging flowers in a crystal vase. Victor was sitting at the table, looking at a laptop. They both froze when I walked in. Nora stood in the doorway. Phone out, recording. Ellie, Diane said, putting down a rose. We were just talking about you. We are so glad you came to your senses. She started to move toward me, arms open for a hug. Stop, I said. I threw the yellow note on the table. It landed on Victor's keyboard. What is this? Victor asked. Picking it up. Read it, I said. He read it. His face went gray. He handed it to Diane. Diane read it. She laughed. A sharp, barking sound. Oh, for heaven's sake, she said. Mara written all over this. The woman was paranoid. Ellie. She was mentally ill. She thought the government was spying on her appliances. You are going to take financial advice from a woman who died of liver failure. Did you steal my college fund? I asked. I didn't shout. I asked it like a simple question about the weather. Diane's face crumpled. For a second, just a split second, I saw the panic, the fear of a woman caught in a lie she had told 15 years ago. Then, the mask slammed back down. How dare you, she whispered. After everything we sacrificed, the market crashed. Ellie, everyone lost money. Grandma left me bonds. I said, bonds don't crash like stocks. Diane, did you cash them? I needed the money for the house, she screamed. The silence that followed was deafening. She covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide. Victor stood up slowly. Diane, he warned. No, I said, keep talking. You needed the money for the house. This house. The one you are standing in, we were going to lose it. Diane sobbed. She collapsed into a chair, putting her head in her hands. Your father lost his job. We were underwater. We had to use the bonds. We meant to pay it back. We just never could. So you let me take out $80,000 in loans. I said, you let me work double shifts at the library. You let me eat ramen for 4 years, while you lived here, on my money. We raised you, Victor shouted, slamming his hand on the table. We put a roof over your head. That money was family money. It was my money, I said. And you are doing it again. I said, you are selling my condo to pay off whatever debt you are in now. I looked at them. They looked small, pathetic. Get out of my house, Victor said. I am leaving. I said, but this note, it goes to the judge, and the forensic accountant Sloan just hired. He is going to look for that bond redemption, and when he finds your signature on it, Diane, you are going to prison for fraud. I turned and walked out. I didn't look back. The next morning, Sloan called. I have the preliminary report from the document examiner. She said, and the signature on the realtor authorization is a composite. Sloan said, it wasn't just forged. It was traced from 3 different documents and digitally stitched together. It is a clumsy job, But it fooled the agent, and the notary Maribel Quent is singing like a bird, Sloane said with grim satisfaction. We threatened her with losing her license permanently. She admitted she never saw you. She admitted Victor sent her the files and paid her $200 extra to expedite it without a video call. We have them, I said. We have them on the condo, Sloane said. But Ellie, there is something else. What we ran a full credit history on you, not just the standard report, but a deep dive into archived accounts. I held my breath. 7 years ago. Sloane said, around the time you bought the condo, there was a refinancing on a property in Florida. I don't own property in Florida. I said, according to this, you did. Sloane said, a timeshare. It was put in your name when you were 22. It was refinanced 3 times, extracting about $40,000 in equity, and then foreclosed on last year. My parents went to Florida every winter. They used my identity. I whispered. They used my credit score to buy a timeshare, stripped the equity, and then let it rot. This is why they think you are incompetent, Sloane said. In their minds, you are just a resource, a line of credit they own. That afternoon, Victor called Sloane. He wants a settlement meeting. Sloane told me. He says he wants to keep this out of the criminal courts. What is the offer, I asked. He is offering to release the proceeds from the condo sale to you, minus a consulting fee for his time if you sign a quitclaim deed for the Briarwick house. I laughed. It was a bitter, jagged sound. He wants the house. I said, he is terrified of that house. Sloane agreed. He is willing to give up the $400,000 from the condo just to get his hands on that bungalow. Why, I asked. Why is a dusty house in the woods worth more than $400,000 cash? Because of the trust, Sloane said, or because of what is inside the house. We agreed to the mediation, not because I intended to settle, but because I wanted to look them in the eye when I dropped the hammer. The mediation was held in a conference room at a neutral law firm. The table was long and oval, made of glass. Diane was wearing black, as if she were in mourning. She had a tissue in her hand that she dabbed at her dry eyes every few minutes. Victor sat next to her, stone-faced. Their lawyer, a tired-looking man named Mr. Henderson, sat at the end. Sloane sat next to me. Nora was in the waiting room, guarding the files. Let's begin, the mediator said. Victor spoke first. Look, he said, his voice reasonable, paternal. We all want what is best for Ellie. We know she is hurting. We know she is confused. We are willing to step back from the condo sale. We will return the funds. All we ask is that the family property in Briarwick be returned to family control. It is a burden Ellie cannot handle right now. Sloane didn't look up from her notes. The Briarwick property is not a family asset, Sloane said. It is a trust asset belonging solely to Ms. Hayes. It was my sister's house. Victor snapped. It belongs to the Hayes bloodline. And Ellie is a Hayes, I said. Diane let out a sob, a loud, theatrical wail. Oh, my poor baby, she cried. You don't know what you are doing. You are destroying this family over a shack. I looked at her. I am not destroying anything. I said, I am just counting the cost. I slid a piece of paper across the table. This is the wire instruction for the condo sale, I said. To Hayes Family Consulting. I slid another paper. This is the lease agreement with Sarah Miller. For the Briarwick house. Signed by you. Diane. I slid a third paper. This is the foreclosure notice for the Florida timeshare you took out in my name. The room went silent. Mr. Henderson picked up the papers. He looked at them, then at Victor. You told me the timeshare was in your name, Mr. Henderson said to Victor. It was a misunderstanding. Victor muttered. I leaned forward. There is no settlement. I said, I am not signing over the house. I am not signing over the trust, and I am pressing charges for identity theft, wire fraud, and elder abuse regarding Aunt Mara's estate. Diane stopped crying. Her face went cold. You ungrateful bitch, she hissed. Mr. Henderson closed his file. I think we are done here, he said. I cannot represent you if you are going to abuse the opposing party. Victor stood up. He leaned over the table, his knuckles white. You think you won? He asked me. You think that house is a prize. It is a curse, Ellie. Mara knew it. That is why she hid it. You go ahead. Go to Briarwick. See what you find. You will wish you had taken the money. We walked out. I felt shaky, but clean. I had said no. For the first time in 33 years, I had said no and meant it. As we were walking to the elevator, a courier came in. Delivery for Ms. Ellie Hayes, he asked. That is me, I said. It was a thick envelope from Ridgeway Fiduciary Services. I opened it right there in the lobby. Dear Ms. Hayes, per your request for full transparency regarding the Mara Hayes Trust, we are releasing the sealed preamble to the trust instrument. Your aunt stipulated that this was to be shared only if your ownership was contested by your parents. I pulled out a document on old heavy paper. It was written in Mara's hand. Declaration of Intent. I, Mara Elizabeth Hayes, create this trust for the benefit of Ellie. I do this not only because I love her, but because I owe a debt to her real father. I stopped reading. The words swam. Her real father. I looked at Sloane. I looked at Nora, who had come out of the waiting room. Read the rest, Sloane said gently. I looked back at the paper. Ellie is not Victor's biological child. Victor knows this. Diane knows this. They have used this truth to justify their treatment of her as an outsider, as an asset, but never as their own. They took her in because her father paid them a lump sum to disappear. They spent that money years ago. I am leaving her the house because it was where she was conceived, and because I want her to know that she does not belong to people who only know how to take. Ellie, you are free. You owe them nothing, not your blood, not your money, not your name. I lowered the paper. The lobby tilted. The floor seemed to rush up to meet me. Ellie is not Victor's biological child. The cruelty made sense now, the coldness, the way Victor looked at me like an investment portfolio rather than a daughter, the way Diane sighed about sacrificing for me. They hadn't sacrificed. They had been paid. I was a job they had taken on, a contract they were trying to squeeze the last few dollars out of. I looked at the elevator doors where Victor and Diane had just disappeared. They aren't my parents, I whispered. Nora grabbed my arm to steady me. Ellie, I am okay, I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. The shock was there, massive and tectonic. But underneath it, there was a strange, soaring relief. I didn't share their blood. I didn't have their rot inside me. I looked at the letter again. Her father paid them a lump sum. Who was he? And where was he? I looked at Sloane, the house. I said, Mara said the house is where I was conceived. Sloane nodded. Then the answers are in Briarwick. I said, I folded the letter. I put it in my pocket. Let's go. I said, I want to see where I really come from. The truth did not break me. It calcified me. Standing in the lobby of the law firm, holding the letter that erased my lineage, I expected to feel unmoored. I expected the ground to dissolve. But instead, the world snapped into a terrifyingly sharp focus. The confusion that had plagued me since I woke up in the hospital. The question of how could they do this finally had an answer. They could do this because to them, I was not a daughter. I was an acquisition. I was a venture capital project funded by a man I had never met. A lump sum payment they had spent years ago, and like any bad investment that had stopped paying dividends, they had decided it was time to liquidate the remaining assets, the condo, the trust, me. It was not cruelty, it was accounting. I folded the letter and put it in my purse, right next to the bottle of pain medication I was trying to wean myself off of. Are you okay? Nora asked, her hand hovering near my elbow. I am ready, I said. The final hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. I spent those 3 days in a state of cold, mechanical preparation. I did not cry. I did not sleep much. I sat with Sloane Mercer and reviewed every bank statement, every hospital log, every forged signature. I memorized the timeline of the theft until it was a prayer I could recite in my sleep. On the morning of the hearing, I woke up before the alarm. The pain in my abdomen was a dull, persistent ache, a reminder that my body was still knitting itself back together. I dressed slowly. I chose a navy blue suit. Tailored and sharp, I covered the dark circles under my eyes with concealer. I pulled my hair back. I looked in the mirror. I looked like a woman who owned herself. We drove to the courthouse in silence. The sky was a hard, brilliant blue, the kind of autumn day that usually made me want to go apple picking. Today, it just felt like a backdrop for a war. Victor and Diane were already there when we arrived. They were standing near the metal detectors. Huddled with Mr. Henderson, they looked impeccable. Victor was wearing a charcoal suit that shouted respectability. Diane was wearing a soft gray dress and a cardigan, clutching a handkerchief. She looked fragile. She looked like the victim. When they saw me, Diane started to move forward, her face crumpling into a tragic mask of maternal concern. "Ellie," she breathed, reaching out. I did not stop walking. I did not look at her. I walked past them as if they were ghosts who had haunted a house I no longer lived in. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and smelling of old paper and floor wax. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Sloane. Nora sat in the first row of the gallery, a silent sentinel. The bailiff called the case, Hayes versus Hayes et al. Judge Ambrose presided. He was a man with a face like a topographic map, lined and weary, with eyes that had seen every variation of human greed Marrow Glen had to offer. He peered over his reading glasses at the defense table. "We are here on an emergency petition regarding the disposition of assets and allegations of fraud." Judge Ambrose said, "Let us proceed." Sloane stood up. She did not raise her voice. She did not pace. She simply laid out the dissection of a crime. "Your Honor," she began, "this is not a family dispute. This is a coordinated financial extraction executed against a vulnerable adult who was medically incapacitated." She called the forensic document examiner first. The expert, a dry man named Dr. Aris, projected the images of the signatures onto a screen. "This is the signature on the listing agreement." "Doctor," Aris said, using a laser pointer to circle the loops of the E, "and this is the signature on the closing documents, and this third one is from a hospital release form." He clicked to the next slide. "They are identical," he said. "Not similar, identical. Down to the pixel. No human being signs their name exactly the same way 3 times. These are digital replications. Someone took a sample of Ms. Hayes' signature, likely from an old birthday card or check, and pasted it onto these documents." "Who authorized the use of this digital signature?" Sloane asked. "There is no record of authorization." "Doctor," Aris said, "and the metadata on the listing agreement shows it was created on a computer registered to Hayes Family Consulting." I looked at Victor. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw locked so tight I could see the muscle twitching. Sloane moved to the notary. She submitted Maribel Quent's sworn affidavit. The notary admits she never spoke to Ellie Hayes. Sloane told the judge she admits she was paid $200 in cash by Victor Hayes to bypass identity verification. That makes the deed of sale void ab initio. Then came the connection to Kestrel Strand Holdings. Sloane presented the business records linking the random buyer to Arthur Vance, Victor's old business partner. They sold a $425,000 asset for $375,000. Sloane said, "They shaved $50,000 off the market value to ensure a sale happened within 4 days. They were not managing an asset, Your Honor. They were fencing stolen goods." Diane let out a small, strangled sob. "Mr." Henderson patted her arm. We called Caleb Dre to the stand. Caleb looked nervous, but his voice was steady. He wore his hospital ID badge clipped to his lapel. "Mr. Dre," Sloane asked, "can you describe the demeanor of the parents while Ellie Hayes was unconscious? They were aggressive." Caleb said, "They were focused on access. Not access to the patient, but access to her property. Can you be specific?" "Mr." Hayes demanded her keys and wallet. Caleb said, "He told us he needed to move her car. We later learned her car was parked at her friend's house, not at the hospital. He wanted the keys to her condo." "And Mrs. Hayes?" She intercepted the nurses. Caleb said, She tried to prevent us from documenting the patient's lucidity, and she specifically blocked Ms. Nora Klein, the patient's designated proxy, from entering the room. Did Ellie Hayes ever ask for her parents? No, Caleb said. He looked at me, a soft, apologetic look. She only asked for Nora. The defense attorney, Mr. Henderson, stood up for cross-examination. He looked tired. He knew he was fighting a losing battle. But he went through the motions. Mr. Dre, isn't it true that families often act erratically under stress? He asked. Isn't it possible Mr. and Mrs. Hayes were just frantic with worry about their only daughter? Caleb paused. I have seen worried parents, he said. Worried parents ask about vital signs. They ask about prognosis. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes asked about power of attorney. There is a difference. Then it was Diane's turn. She took the stand like she was ascending a scaffold. She clutched a tissue. She looked at the judge with wide, watery eyes. Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Henderson asked gently, why did you sell the condo? Diane took a shaky breath. We were terrified, she said. Her voice trembled. Ellie has always been fragile. She doesn't handle stress well. She has had financial trouble in the past. Objection, Sloan said lazily. No evidence of financial trouble. Sustained, the judge muttered. We thought she was going to die. Diane continued, tears spilling over. The doctor said there were complications. We didn't want her to wake up to a mountain of medical bills. We wanted to clear the deck for her. We wanted her to come home to us, where she belongs. We were going to set up a trust. It was all for her. She looked at me. We love her so much, she whispered. We sacrificed everything for her. It was a beautiful performance. If I hadn't known about the college fund, if I hadn't known about the timeshare in Florida, if I hadn't read the letter from Aunt Mara, I might have believed it. Mr. Henderson sat down, looking relieved. Sloan stood up. She didn't walk to the podium. She stood by the table, holding a single piece of paper. Mrs. Hayes, Sloan said, you say you sold the condo to pay medical bills? Yes. Diane said, did you receive a bill? Well, no, not yet, but we knew they would be huge. Are you aware that Ellie's insurance covers 100% of her surgery costs after a $5,000 deductible? Diane blinked. I didn't know the specifics. So you sold a $400,000 home to pay a $5,000 bill. We were being proactive, Diane snapped. The mask slipping. Let's talk about the proceeds, Sloan said. The money was wired to Hayes Family Consulting. Is Ellie a signatory on that account? No. But, so you wired her money to an account she cannot access. We were holding it for her. Diane shouted, because she is incompetent. She is on drugs. She is unstable. Sloan picked up another paper. I have here Ellie's performance reviews from her employer for the last 5 years. Exemplary. Promoted ahead of schedule. I have her credit score. Prior to the identity theft regarding the Florida timeshare, 780. Does this sound like an incompetent person? She is good at hiding it. Diane hissed. And finally, Sloan said, her voice dropping an octave, I have a lease agreement for a property in Briarwick. Signed by you. Where did the $30,000 in rent go? Mrs. Hayes. Did that go to medical bills too? 2 years before the surgery, Diane's mouth opened and closed. She looked at Victor. Victor was staring at the table, his face the color of ash. We used it to maintain the property. Diane stammered. We have the receipts from the tenant, Sloan said. She paid for her own repairs. The money went to your personal checking account. Sloan sat down. No further questions. The judge looked at me. Ms. Hayes, he said, do you wish to make a statement? Sloan touched my arm. I didn't have to, but I wanted to. I stood up. I walked to the podium. I gripped the wood to steady my hands, which were trembling not from fear, but from the sheer physical effort of standing upright for so long. I looked at the judge. Then I turned and looked at Victor and Diane. They were not looking at me. They were looking at the floor, at the wall, anywhere but at the daughter they had sold. I don't have a long speech. I said, My voice was raspy. I was unconscious. I said I was lying in a hospital bed, unable to speak, unable to defend myself. And while I was helpless, the people who were supposed to protect me sold my home. I took a breath. The pain in my stomach flared, sharp and hot. They didn't do it to save me. I said, they did it because they saw an opportunity. They saw a window where I couldn't say no. And when I woke up, I paused, looking at Diane. When I woke up, they asked me to thank them for it. I turned back to the judge. That is all, Your Honor. The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Judge Ambrose took off his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked at Mr. Henderson. Counsel, he said, this is appalling. Mr. Henderson said nothing. He stared at his notepad. The judge began to speak, his voice ringing with the finality of a gavel strike. The temporary restraining order on the proceeds from the sale of the property at 410 Mill Street is hereby made permanent, pending a full forensic accounting. He looked at Victor. I am referring the matter of the notarization and the signature to the district attorney's office for investigation into fraud and forgery. I am also referring the matter of the Briarwick rental income for potential larceny charges. He looked at Diane. There will be no conservatorship. There will be no guardianship. Ms. Hayes has demonstrated more competence in this courtroom today than either of the defendants. He shuffled his papers. I am also issuing a 5-year protective order. The defendants are to have no contact with the plaintiff. None, no calls, no emails, no showing up at her residence. He banged the gavel. Court is adjourned. It wasn't instant justice. The money was still stuck in escrow. The criminal charges would take months to process. The damage to my credit from the Florida timeshare would take a year to fix. But as I walked out of the courtroom, I felt lighter than I had in years. I walked past Victor and Diane in the aisle. Diane was weeping into Victor's shoulder, a sound that used to tear my heart out. Now, it just sounded like noise. Victor looked up as I passed. His eyes were cold, hard flint. You think you won, he whispered. You have no one. I stopped. I looked at him. I thought about the letter in my pocket. I thought about the transaction that had brought me into their house. I never had anyone. I said, I just had owners. Now I don't. I walked out the double doors into the sunlight. Nora was waiting. She hugged me. Careful of my incision. It is over, she said. No, I said, looking toward the parking lot. It is just starting. I didn't go back to the hotel. I didn't go back to the condo. I got in my car, which I had retrieved from Nora's driveway, and I drove north. I drove for 3 hours. I watched the city fade into suburbs, and the suburbs fade into farmland, and the farmland fade into the dense, pine-heavy woods of Briarwick County. The sun was setting when I turned onto Pine Hollow Road. The sky was a bruised purple, streaked with gold. I pulled into the driveway of 882. The house looked different today. It didn't look like a ruin. It didn't look like a burden. It looked like a survivor. Sarah Miller's car was gone. She was at work. The house was quiet. I walked up the steps to the porch. The wood creaked under my feet, a welcoming sound. I sat down on the swing. The rusty chains groaned, but they held. I rocked back and forth, listening to the wind in the trees. This was mine, not because I had bought it, not because I had earned it, but because someone had seen me, really seen me, and wanted me to have a place to land, Aunt Mara, and whoever came before her. I sat there for a long time, letting the silence wash over the noise of the last few weeks. The betrayal, the surgery, the court, it all felt far away here. Finally, the cold drove me inside. I had the key now. Sarah had given me a spare. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the living room. It was modest, old carpet, wood paneling, but it felt warm. I walked through the house, touching the walls. I went into the back bedroom. It was currently used for storage, stacked with boxes. I remembered the note, the second note from Mara. There is a panel in the closet, rear wall, bottom left. I walked to the closet. I pushed aside a stack of winter blankets. I knelt down, wincing as my stitches pulled. I felt along the wood paneling at the back. It felt solid, but then my fingers found a groove, a slight imperfection in the seam. I pushed. The panel clicked and popped open. A dark, dusty space was revealed between the studs. I reached in. My hand closed around a metal box. I pulled it out. It was a heavy gray lockbox, the kind you buy at an office supply store. It wasn't locked. I sat on the floor and opened the lid. It smelled of old paper and lavender. On top was a stack of photographs, black and white, curling at the edges. I picked up the first one. It was a picture of a young woman laughing. She was sitting on this very porch, her head thrown back, a cigarette in her hand. She looked like me. Same jawline, same eyes. Mara, no. Mara had dark hair. This woman was blonde. I turned the photo over. Elizabeth, 1990. Elizabeth, my middle name. I picked up the next photo. It was the same woman, standing next to a man. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a kind, open face. He had his arm around her. They looked happy. They looked in love. I turned it over. Elizabeth and David, Briarwick, David. I dug deeper into the box. There were bundles of letters tied with ribbon. There was a baby rattle, silver and tarnished, and at the bottom, there was a single brass key. It had a tag attached to it. Briarwick Community Bank, Box 4. 04. I held the key in my palm. It was cold and heavy. I looked at the photo of the man named David. I looked at his eyes. They were my eyes. The letter from Mara echoed in my head. Her real father paid them a lump sum to disappear. Why had he abandoned me? Had he paid them to take a problem off his hands? Or was it something else? I picked up one of the letters. The envelope was postmarked from a prison in upstate New York, dated 30 years ago, to my daughter. It read on the front, "To be given to her when she is free." I stared at the handwriting. It was jagged, forceful. I wasn't Victor's asset. I wasn't Diane's burden. I was the daughter of a secret they had been paid to bury. I looked out the window. The darkness had fully fallen now. The woods were black and deep. My parents, my real parents, were a mystery waiting in a safety deposit box in a small-town bank, and I had the key. I put the letter back in the box. I closed the lid. I wasn't afraid. I had lost a condo. I had lost a family I thought was mine. I had lost the illusion of safety. But as I sat there in the quiet house, with the key in my hand and the truth in the walls, I realized I had won something much more valuable. I had won my life back, and for the first time, the story of who Ellie Hayes was entirely up to me. I stood up, picked up the box, and walked into the kitchen to make a pot of coffee. It was going to be a long night of reading, and tomorrow, the bank opened at 9. Thank you for listening to this story. It was a journey into the darkest parts of family betrayal, but also into the resilience of the human spirit. I would love to hear your thoughts on Ellie's decision. Do you think she should open the safety deposit box or leave the past buried? And please, let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I am always amazed to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, secrets, and the long road to truth. Until next time.